She arrived at her uncle's ranch with a suitcase in her hand and a knot twisting in her stomach. The land stretched wide and beautiful rolling pastures, the scent of dust and summer heat, and the distant thunder of hooves, but none of that comforted her. Horses had once been her greatest love, until the day one had thrown her hard enough to fracture her arm and shatter her confidence. Ever since, she could barely look at a saddle without feeling that old fear prickling up her spine. Her uncle, a patient man with a gentle smile, welcomed her warmly. He believed ranch life might help her heal, or at the very least, pull her out of the quiet shell she'd been living in. But she kept her distance whenever they passed the stables. She saw the animals' tall, powerful silhouettes framed by sunlight and instinctively stepped back. They were magnificent, yes, but they were also unpredictable, and she no longer trusted herself around them. The ranch hands had already heard about her fall years ago, and though they didn't tease her, she could feel their eyes filled with a mixture of sympathy and curiosity. Their conversations often drifted toward Ghostfire, the untamed stallion who ruled the ranch like a king. Even from afar, she heard the stories. He'd thrown every rider who dared climb onto him, snapped halters, leapt fences, and once even charged straight at a cowboy who got too close. No one understood him. No one controlled him. She didn't want to understand him. She didn't want to go near any horse, especially one like that. But fate, as usual, didn't ask what she wanted. One quiet afternoon, feeling restless and needing space, she wandered farther than she intended. The breeze was soft, the grass brushing her legs as she walked along the fence line. She thought she was alone until the heavy thud of hooves made her freeze. She turned, heart racing, and saw him, Ghostfire. Wild, white-maned, and watching her with an intensity that rooted her in place. Her breath caught. He wasn't supposed to be this close. She wasn't supposed to be this close. All she knew was fear, and yet she didn't run. She stood as still as the fence post beside her, hardly daring to breathe while Ghostfire regarded her with those sharp, intelligent eyes. The stallion didn't behave like the other horses she had seen on the ranch. They grazed lazily or trotted in predictable circles. But Ghostfire he moved with a restless energy, every muscle taut beneath his silver-dappled coat. Like a storm waiting for the right moment to break, she took one small step back, hoping he would lose interest and turn away. Instead, he mirrored her movement, closing the distance by a deliberate pace. A chill raced up her spine. Horses weren't supposed to act this way. They were supposed to shy from strangers, especially strangers who radiated fear. The fence between them suddenly felt too thin, too fragile, as if it couldn't possibly hold back the power of a creature who refused to be broken by skilled cowboys. She swallowed hard. Her mind whispered warnings, memories of her fall flashing in sharp, painful snapshots. The dust, the panic, the helplessness. But Ghostfire didn't rear or snort or pin his ears. He simply watched her, as though he were trying to understand something about her that even she didn't understand. A ranch hand shouted her name in the distance, a panicked edge to his voice. The sound startled her, but it startled Ghostfire more. His head jerked up, ears flicking, and for a heartbeat she braced herself for the wild reaction everyone had whispered about. She waited for the violence, the unpredictability. Instead, he took a single step back, not in fear but in acknowledgement, like he didn't want to frighten her. She blinked, stunned. That wasn't possible. He didn't show consideration, not to the cowboys, not to anyone. She'd heard enough stories to know that Ghostfire wasn't known for gentleness. The ranch hand ran up to her, breathless, grabbing her elbow to pull her away from the fence. "You shouldn't be here," he muttered, voice low. "Not near him." She nodded numbly, letting him lead her back toward the barn. But she couldn't stop glancing over her shoulder. Ghostfire still stood exactly where she'd left him, head slightly lowered, eyes following her with a strange, unsettling calm. For the first time since her fall, her fear didn't feel simple. It felt curious. The next morning, she tried to lose herself in routine, helping her aunt in the kitchen, sweeping the porch, doing anything that kept her far from the stables. But her mind wouldn't leave Ghostfire behind. She kept replaying the moment he stepped back for her, almost politely, as if he'd understood her fear and respected it. Horses didn't do that. Not wild ones. Not ones like him. By noon, curiosity tugged at her stronger than caution. She drifted toward the paddock again, telling herself she would stay far back this time, just watch from a safe distance. The ranch hands were busy saddling horses for afternoon training. No one paid her much attention as she slipped toward the fence line. Ghostfire was already there. Not grazing in the far pasture as he usually did, not pacing the edges like a restless storm, but standing still, his gaze fixed on her the moment she appeared. She froze mid-step, air catching in her throat. He approached, slow and deliberate, as though he had been waiting. The ranch hands noticed, their conversations cutting off abruptly. A few dropped what they were doing and moved closer, alarm rising in their eyes. Everyone knew Ghostfire didn't tolerate being approached. She lifted her hands automatically, palms out, a gesture of uncertainty rather than confidence. "Please don't," she whispered under her breath, unsure who she was speaking to, herself or him. Ghostfire stopped just a foot from the fence. His ears pricked forward, not in aggression but in attention. And then, before anyone could process what was happening, he lowered his head. Not a casual dip. Not a grazing motion. A deliberate, unmistakable bow. A ripple of shock ran through the ranch yard. She heard a ranch hand curse softly. Another whispered something like a prayer. No one had ever seen him bow. Not to the ranch owner. Not to the most experienced rider. Not even to the trainers who had tried for months to earn his trust. But he bowed for her. Her heart pounded, not from fear this time, but from something deeper, something that made her throat tighten. There was a connection here, something she didn't understand yet, something she wasn't sure she deserved. "Why me?" she whispered. Ghostfire lifted his head slowly, meeting her eyes with a calm that felt almost human. And in that moment, she realized her life on the ranch was about to change. The moment Ghostfire bowed to her, the ranch transformed from a quiet place of chores and routines into a storm of voices and opinions. The ranch hands, who had spent months trying to tame the stallion, gathered in tight clusters, whispering furiously as she walked past. Some stared at her with open amazement, others with disbelief, and a few with something edging toward fear. News traveled fast in a place where nothing ever stayed secret for long. By the time she reached the porch, her uncle was already waiting, arms crossed, jaw tight, eyes sharp with concern. He asked her to explain exactly what happened, and when she did, his expression shifted from disbelief to alarm. "Ghostfire doesn't bow," he said firmly. "Not to anyone. Whatever happened, it was luck. Or he was tired. Or something else. But you stay away from him, understand?" She nodded, but the warning settled heavily in her chest. She didn't want to disobey him. She didn't want trouble. But she also couldn't shake the feeling that something unspoken had passed between her and the stallion, something she couldn't simply ignore. Inside the barn, the tension thickened. A few ranch hands avoided her entirely, muttering that she was dangerous to be around now because Ghostfire was unpredictable. Others seemed fascinated, watching her like she was part of the same legend they'd been telling for years about the wild stallion no one could touch. Eli, the gentle ranch hand who kept mostly to himself, found her sitting alone by a stack of hay bales. He didn't ask what she had done to make the stallion bow, nor did he treat her like a miracle. Instead, he sat beside her quietly, offering the calm she didn't realize she needed. "People fear what they don't understand," he said softly. "Ghostfire isn't dangerous because of you. He's different. And maybe he sees something in you that the rest of us can't." But her uncle stood firm. He posted new rules. She wasn't allowed near Ghostfire. She wasn't to visit the paddock alone. No one supervised wandering. The ranch was divided, some curious, some afraid, some quietly hopeful, and she was caught in the middle, torn between respecting the rules and acknowledging the invisible bond she felt every time Ghostfire looked at her, a bond the entire ranch could feel, even if they couldn't explain it. Her uncle kept a close eye on her after Ghostfire's bow, worried she might be tempted to get near the Stallion again. The ranch had erupted in whispers, some calling it a miracle, others calling it a dangerous fluke. Either way, she wasn't allowed near him. Rules were rules. But rules didn't stop her curiosity, and they certainly didn't stop Ghostfire. Every time she walked past the barn, he raised his head. Every time she crossed the yard, his ears flicked toward her. He noticed her in a way he noticed no one else, and she couldn't pretend she didn't notice him back. It was the gentle ranch hand, Eli, who caught her lingering near the training ring one evening. He was younger than the others, patient and quieter than most. He didn't mock her fear or push her to get over it. Instead, he simply said, "If you ever want to learn again, I can teach you." She hesitated. The memories of her fall still lived beneath her skin like old bruises. But Eli's offer wasn't a challenge. It was an invitation. So she agreed on one condition: no one else could know. Their lessons began at dusk, when the sun dipped low and the rest of the ranch settled into supper. Eli chose the calmest mare on the property, a gentle creature with soft, trusting eyes. He didn't force her into the saddle right away. Instead, he taught her how to breathe near a horse, how to touch it without flinching, how to read its posture and understand its mood. For days, all she did was stand beside the mare, brushing her coat, learning the rhythm of her breath. And slowly, the panic in her chest eased. Her body began remembering what her mind had forgotten, that horses weren't monsters. They were beings that responded to trust. Meanwhile, her bond with Ghostfire grew in secret. She visited him at night, staying behind the fence, whispering to him the way one might whisper to a friend. She told him about her fear, about her lessons, about the strange pull she felt whenever he looked at her. Ghostfire listened, always. Sometimes he stepped close enough that she could feel his warm breath on her hands. Other times he simply stood guard-like in the moonlight. These secret moments, her quiet lessons with Eli and her whispered nights with Ghostfire, began stitching something new inside her: courage. She wasn't a rider yet, but she was becoming one. The storm rolled in without warning, one of those violent prairie tempests that turned the sky black in minutes and sent animals scattering for shelter. She watched from the porch as the first crack of thunder split the air, rattling the windows. Her aunt rushed to secure tools, her uncle shouted orders to the hands, and the ranch became a flurry of alarmed motion. But through the chaos, one thought struck her like a cold blade: Ghostfire. The Stallion hated storms. Everyone knew it. He paced, reared, and fought the fences whenever lightning struck too close. She felt a surge of dread. She had seen him restless before, but she had never seen him terrified. A second thunderclap shook the ground, followed by the unmistakable sound of wood splitting. One of the paddocks had given way. "Ghostfire's out." A cowboy yelled out. Her heart dropped. Already, she could imagine him bolting toward the cliffs at the edge of the ranch, the place every rider feared, where the ground sloped sharply into jagged stones below. A wild horse in a panic could misstep easily. And Ghostfire wasn't just wild, he was lightning with a heartbeat. The cowboys mounted quickly, shouting over the wind as they chased after the fleeing Stallion. She stood frozen, breath tight, until she felt that same mysterious pull she had felt the first time Ghostfire met her eyes. She couldn't stay behind. Not when he might die. Not when he had trusted her in a way he trusted. No one else. Her boots pounded against the wet ground as she ran after the riders, ignoring her uncle's shout to stop. Rain soaked her hair, blinded her vision, but she didn't slow. She followed the thunder of hooves, followed instinct, followed the invisible thread tying her to the untamed creature, who had bowed only for her dot. She reached the ridge just as Ghostfire reared dangerously close to the cliff edge. Eyes wide with terror, mane whipping like silver fire in the storm. The cowboys couldn't get within 10 feet. He lashed out at every approach. But when she stepped forward, soaked, trembling, breath broken, he stopped. His hooves settled. His head lowered. His frantic breathing eased as his eyes fixed on hers. The storm was still screaming around them, but in that moment, everything between them went quiet. She lifted a shaking hand. "Come back," she whispered, and Ghostfire listened. The storm eased into a steady rain, but the wind still howled across the ridge where Ghostfire stood, massive, trembling, and only a step away from disaster. She could feel the fear radiating off him, a raw, electric panic that had driven him straight to the most dangerous edge of the ranch. The cowboys kept their distance, watching with a mixture of helplessness and stunned disbelief. They had never seen Ghostfire calm for anyone. But when she stepped closer, he didn't rear. He didn't bolt. He only breathed heavy, shaking breaths that matched her own. She stopped just short of touching him. "You're all right," she whispered, though her voice quivered with nerves. "You're not alone." For a long moment, Ghostfire simply stared at her. Rain ran down his powerful neck. His coat darkened to near black by the storm. Behind her, she heard one of the cowboys mutter, "He's letting her in." Slowly, carefully, the stallion bent his front legs, lowering his massive frame into a bow. But this time, it wasn't just a greeting. It was an invitation. Her heart thundered. She had never ridden again after the fall, had barely sat near a saddle during her lessons with Eli, and now she was faced with the most impossible choice: trust herself or trust him. Her fingers trembled as she reached out. She laid her hand on the warm, rain-slicked curve of his neck. Ghostfire didn't flinch. In fact, he leaned into the touch, as though reassuring her that the fear she carried didn't have to rule her anymore. "I can't," she murmured, voice breaking. Ghostfire exhaled softly, almost a plea. Thunder shook the sky again, and instinct surged through her. She couldn't leave him out here, not when he had chosen her, not when he trusted her to guide him. Before she could second-guess herself, she grasped his mane, lifted her leg, and swung onto his back. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't confident. But it was brave. The ranch hands gasped. Ghostfire rose to his full height, powerful and steady beneath her. No bucking, no rearing, no fight. For the first time since her childhood fall, she felt the rhythm of a horse beneath her, the sway of movement, the living heartbeat of another creature in sync with her own, and with gentle pressure from her hands, Ghostfire stepped away from the cliff and carried her home through the rain. The girl who believed she couldn't ride was riding the wildest horse on the ranch. By the time she and Ghostfire reached the ranch yard, the storm had quieted into a soft drizzle. The cowboys rode in behind her, their faces a mix of disbelief and awe. No one said a word at first. They simply watched as the wild stallion, the horse no one could break, carried her with the steady calm of a guardian guiding someone home. Her uncle hurried toward them, worry and shock warring across his face. But when Ghostfire stopped in front of him and lowered his head respectfully, even he fell silent. Carefully, she slid from the stallion's back, her boots landing on muddy ground with a soft thud. Her legs shook, but this time not from fear, only from the overwhelming realization of what she had done. Eli stepped forward, eyes wide but smiling. "You did it," he whispered. She almost laughed. "No." He did. The cowboys murmured among themselves, unable to make sense of it. Ghostfire had been a problem, a legend, a danger until now. Until her. And the more she looked at the stallion standing quietly beside her, the more she understood. This wasn't about riding. This was about trust. The kind of trust that couldn't be forced with ropes or broken with training. The kind that grew from recognition, one spirit recognizing another. When she reached up and placed her hand on his face, Ghostfire closed his eyes, leaning gently into her palm. The ranch fell silent again, as if no one wanted to break the fragile magic of the moment. Her uncle cleared his throat. "I think we've all been going about this wrong," he said slowly. "Seems he's been waiting for the right person all along." The right person. Her. The girl who once couldn't touch a saddle without trembling. In the days that followed, everything changed. She rode Ghostfire again and again. Each time, her confidence grew, shaped by patience, trust, and the quiet understanding that flowed between them. People from nearby towns came to watch the once wild stallion trot calmly at her side, stories spreading faster than she could keep up with. But she didn't care about the attention. What mattered was the freedom she felt each time Ghostfire carried her across the open fields, the wind in her hair, the power beneath her, the fear long gone. She had arrived at the ranch broken by doubt. She stayed because a wild stallion taught her courage. And together they became a legend.